What's up guys, JayzTwoCents here, and you know what? Destiny 2 has just launched, and yeah, so that's a pretty anticipated game, I think. I've never actually played it. I know it was a console, like, what was it called? Exclusive? That's it, right? An exclusive. It was only on like PS4 and Xbox One. But Destiny 2 is out for PC, and technically it launched yesterday. And I had a pretty interesting idea, something I've never done before. We've done budget builds, right? But has anyone ever actually done a build for a new game and built it specifically to the minimum specs to see how well it actually performs? I don't know, probably, but I'm gonna do that today anyway. Fans of the original Half Series cases from Cooler Master can rejoice because the Half is back and better than ever. Featuring 200mm RGB front fans, tempered glass side panel, and ample airflow, the H500P is a worthy successor to the original High Airflow series. Learn more about the new Cooler Master H500P by heading to coolermaster.com. Recommended specs are quite spread out, and the reason for that, I think they're trying to account for the users on DDR4 and DDR3, which I think is very strange. Like, a minimum is a minimum, right? If it can run on the older platform on DDR3, that should be the minimum. But they're calling minimum specs on this a 3.5 gigahertz i3 3250 or a 3.5 gigahertz Pentium G4560. Two very different CPUs, which I think is very strange. One on DDR3, one on DDR4, right? Because the Pentium is new, and the 3250 is an Ivy Bridge era CPU. If you're running AMD, they recommend an FX 4350. Now, I would have loved to have done that route, the FX 4350, but I don't have one. I have a 6100, but that's a 6-core, not a 4-core, but it's an older architecture, like Bulldozer. It was specifically Bulldozers when it first launched, versus like the Excavator and Pile Driver stuff. So I don't know if it'd be fair if I did the 6100, to be honest. So I'm trying to go specifically on what the minimums are here. GPU-wise, it recommends either a 662 gigabyte or a 1052 gigabyte, or if you're on AMD, a 7850. I don't have a 7850. I used to, but not anymore. So I'll probably be going with a 660 and 6 gigabytes of system RAM. Again, I don't have 2 gigabyte sticks of RAM for DDR4, so I'll be running 8. But I think most people, when I did my video about what's more recommended, 8, 4, or 16, most of you guys were like 16 bare minimum, so I don't think people are gonna give me a hard time about the 8 gigs. I'm trying hard to build this specifically to the spec sheet, but it's not easy. Again, they're recommending a 3.4 gigahertz i5 2400 Sandy Bridge era, or a 3.5 gigahertz i5 7400. That's such a wide range. I mean, those two CPUs perform very differently. So I feel like their own, like, Activision just seems to be all over the place on what their minimum requirements are. I mean, there's such a spectrum here. If you're on AMD, they recommend an R5 1600X. So I think when we do the second part of this video where we actually show the recommended, I think we'll go with the R5 1600 because that's more middle ground. That's not that huge range. On the GPU side, they recommend a 4 gigabyte GTX 970. Clearly they typoed, they meant 3.5 gigabytes. Or a 6 gigabyte 1060. No, I have I think I have a 970 still. If I do, we'll run that. If you're on AMD, R9 390 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. So I knew these budget builds would come in handy, right? So we've still got this system. You guys remember this, where we were kind of doing the budget build shootout where we had Austin come and kind of do a blind taste test? Right, so we're gonna go ahead, we're running the H270 or Z270 here, which is a bit weird for a Pentium, but that's what I'm using because at least we can overclock it if we want to, but if I just drop in the CPU, it makes no difference really to what motherboard we're running for the most part. So our CPU's in there. We're running our 8 gigabytes of Corsair DDR4 LPX, it's low profile memory, and we need to install the box cooler, and I need thermal paste. It's kind of nice working with these tiny little CPUs again, because you can literally do the grain of rice method for the thermal paste, because when you deal with Threadripper and the new Intels, man, do you go through a lot of thermal paste, I'm telling you. Okay, GPU, we need a 660. Ha, I just happen to have one of those right here. This is one of the first GPUs I ever did anything with on this channel. Okay, so this is ready to go. We just need our download to finish. This has been downloading forever because I'm pretty sure that like the servers are being hit hard right now with in terms of downloading. Actually, you know what we can do is we can prep the recommended system while we're waiting, can't we? I'm so glad we kept these systems together, to be honest with you. This is our recommended system. This has a 1200 in it right now. Remember I did the AMD 1200 test. I think AMD wins the box cooler competition too. They're just better coolers. We need to make an antiminium cooler. What do you think?
Aluminium?
No, antiminium.
Adamantium?
The metal adamantium, is that what the Wolverine, you know?
Adamantium.
Adamantium, whatever. Oh, everyone calls me such a fanboy and is like, where's all your AMD stuff? Why don't you have all you have is Intel? Well, I have more Ryzen CPUs than I do Intel. It's a Ryzen 5 1600X right there. Yeah, baby. That's what we're gonna want. It's hollow. Okay, got a 1600 in here. Or 1600X, actually, which is the one that was recommended. I'd actually thought about tearing these systems apart like last week when we had, well, last week we didn't have any downtime, but the week before that, and I'm glad we didn't. This is why I don't get rid of old hardware very often, because stuff like this comes in very handy. We can go back and revisit a topic like this, or visit a new topic like this with old hardware. What did I just click? Normally, like I would have accidentally bumped like cancel. We start all over. That would suck. It's like we're at the fair with all that ketchup and mustard. We're at a ball game. Yay, sports ball! Just to recap here, we've got a Pentium G4560 run with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Note, it said 6 was the minimum, but we're running 8 with a GTX 660. We are gonna be running an SSD. We're not gonna be applying any overclocking to this. The motherboard, although overclockable, I don't think someone running this level of hardware would be running an H270 with overclocking. So there's that. Maybe I'll play a little bit, I don't know, we'll see. Versus the recommended here, which is an AMD Ryzen 5 1600X, 8 gigabytes of ballistics RAM, running a GTX 970. Again, they called it 4 gig. We know it's a 3.5 gig, 500 watt power supply, and the very same SSD, both running box coolers. So I think this is a pretty close representation of to what the average gamer might be running. So it's gonna take this thing a second to turn on because it now has to reinitialize for that hard drive. But you guys are seeing firsthand though, I get this question all the time, like, Jay, can you take a hard drive with one Windows 10 installation and just like move it to another computer with all different hardware? And you'll see people be like, no, it's locked to the motherboard, it won't work. That's true for OEMs and things like HP and Dells and stuff like that. But see, when you plug in a hard drive into a new system, Windows automatically detects all the new drivers and chipsets and stuff that it's sensing, and then it's reinstalling all of the base drivers it needs to move forward. All you've got to do at this point is basically just install all the new drivers for your motherboard, like your chipset drivers and LAN and all that stuff, just for good measure, although it will work, and you're up and running. All right, so video VSync is on. Let's turn that off, because I mean, it's 144 hertz panel, so I'm gonna turn that off though. Field of view, screen bound, adjust brightness. I'm gonna bring that down just a tad, make it easier for you guys to see. Graphics quality overall is on custom. I put the anti-aliasing to FXAA. It's on HDAO, 2X, texture quality low, medium, low, and then the rest is pretty much medium. Motion blur off, wind impulse, what is that? Do you know what that is? No. Render resolution and film grain is on. I'm gonna turn film grain off. There. So you can see up in the left-hand corner right now, this is the recommended settings. Now that was the settings it loaded with. The only changes I made was I turned off motion blur and I turned off film grain. And you can see we're getting about 48, 54, 51. It's not terrible though. I mean, it's fairly consistent. And remember, we are playing with the minimum specs here. Oh, is that bad? I killed a thingy. Boom. I'm fairly impressed with the FPS so far though. Oh, C is melee. Oh, that was an accident. I didn't mean to do that. It said push C for melee. Remember when I turned the corner, I did it, and then it hit that guy. They probably set that up like that on purpose, but still. Going for single shot accuracy here. For minimum specs here, and given the hardware we're running on, I'm impressed so far. I'm gonna be honest, I am quite impressed. I don't know how demanding this game is versus others, but you know what though? If this is a game that's fun to play, right? It's got multiplayer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I have to assume that this is a good thing. If they optimize the game well enough to where more people can play it, that's a good thing. That guy's a shield. Nothing's more depressing than, you know, having to run out. That was a good throw. Having to run out and throw money at a system just to play a game. So you buy a $50 game or $60 game, then you spend $500 to upgrade something in your system. That's not, you know, That's not good or conducive to anyone's budget. All right, so that was the minimum requirements. Now what about when we step it up to the recommended? I like ramped up big time. This is noticeably noisier though than the other system, to be honest. Okay, so we have the exact same settings here, and we'll see how far we can push it with the recommended. But as you can see, the exact same settings as before. But if we return to the game, look at our FPS. More than double, right? 128 FPS. Wow, look how smooth this is. This is cool. I mean, I love games where more people can enjoy them and be a little bit less worried about their hardware. Because, I mean, look at that, 160 FPS right there. You can see how smooth this is, can't you? Like, I know the camera can't because we're recording at 30 FPS. But like with your eye, what do you see, Nick?
Ridiculously smooth, like butter.
I bumped that button, which made it look like a totally pro throw, didn't it?
Yeah.
I bumped it. I went to strafe and I bumped Q and it threw the grenade at him. It's that very same battle we did before. We were hitting like 50, 60. That 114. So those critical hit points then, right? You hit their head? Yeah, very true. So if you hit their body, oh, I'm in fire. Just like Warcraft, I'm always standing in things. Yeah, look at those FPS. I mean, that's good. All right, so I guess the question now asks, how far can we push it, right? I wouldn't have pushed the other config because we were below the magic 60 FPS, which gamers like to stick at, right? So we wouldn't have pushed that any farther. But what if we take our texture? No, what if we did this? What if we brought environment, all this stuff up to like high? Can we do that? There we go. Oh, okay, so with everything set to highest, we came down to the 90s. Oh no, we're in the 90s. Oh no. 75, 89. But you know what though, visually, I'm not seeing that much of a difference. Are you? I don't think we're supposed to go that way.
Not yet.
This is such a pretty game.
Oh, that rain though.
A rain? Yeah. Oh, they're shooting at us. That's so rude. Oh god, they're landing. They're jump troopers. So anyway, there you go, guys. Destiny 2, yeah, minimum and recommended settings. As you can see, you don't need a high-end PC to run some of the more modern games, as long as the developers do a good job at actually, you know, optimizing for it. I mean, obviously this came out on console first, and to me it seems like if this is a port, it's a pretty good job. I mean, the FPS looks good. It doesn't feel like a console port. It feels, to me, it kind of feels like Doom or something like that was made for PC. And yeah, I'm excited to play this game, I think. Don't tell Brian though, he's been trying to get me to play it. I didn't want to get into it, but I might have to actually play through the story now. So anyway guys, there you go. Minimum versus recommended. Are there any other games you think we should do this with? If so, put titles of those games down in the description below. And I think Nick and I agree that when new games launch like this now, we're gonna start doing this. We're gonna start doing min and recommended. And instead of just benchmarking the highest end GPUs, which you know is gonna chug through any game with no problem, we'll start letting everyone know exactly where you need to be to start playing your favorite AAA titles. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. All right, let me get back to this game.